Good evening, everyone. Welcome to tonight's My Journey webinar, College for Students with Learning Differences, Navigating Admissions and Support Services. My name is Candace Lytle, and I'm your host for this premier event in our My Journey series. I am beyond excited to have all of you here, and on behalf of everyone at ACT, thank you so much for joining us. I'm also so honored to be joined by our incredible expert speakers tonight from CollegeWise, but before I turn things over to them, I want to cover some essentials to help you with your viewing experience. You're going to see several different widgets and tools on your screen, and you are in control of these. They're resizable, they're movable, so you're welcome to move them around to get the most out of your screen space. If you have any questions during the webinar, you can submit them through the Q&A engagement tool, and we'll do our best to answer them throughout the webinar. We'll also have some time for questions at the end. A copy of the slides are available in the resources tool, as well as some other handy items to accompany this presentation and for your reference long after it's over. The webinar will be recorded and sent to the email address you registered with within 1 to 2 weeks at the latest. For your best viewing experience, we encourage using a high speed and stable internet connection and closing any programs or browsers running in the background that could cause issues. If you're struggling with anything, check out the help tool at the bottom of your screen. And finally, if you need a refresher, there is a helpful webinar viewing tips and reminders slide on your screen below that will remain visible the entire webinar. Okay, I'm ready, and I hope you are at this time. I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to our friends at CollegeWise so they can tell you a bit about themselves and jump into their insights related to admissions. Thank you so much. Back over to you, Belinda.
Hi, everybody. Candace, thank you so much for the warm welcome, and thank you to everybody at the ACT for inviting us to be here with you all tonight. We are so excited to talk about how we can support students with learning differences and their families through this college admissions process. We hope that you will come out of tonight's webinar with more confidence and more clarity around some of those things, and hope that you will feel able to tackle some of the areas that come up within this process. So I'm Belinda Paris. I'm the Director of Partnerships here at CollegeWise, and I work really closely with fantastic organizations like the ACT and also with schools all around the United States to help bring CollegeWise's college preparation and admissions expertise to as many families as possible. In a moment, I'm going to introduce you to Christina and Jessica, and they will, but before that, I'm just going to tell you a little bit more about CollegeWise so that we can make sure that you know who we are. And I'm also going to launch a quick poll so that we can find out exactly who's joining us tonight, and then we can tailor our presentation more specifically to who we have in the audience. So launching the poll now, the question is, who is joining us here today? So we'll leave this up for about 30 seconds. So are you a student? Are you a parent or guardian? Are you a student and parent and guardian team together? We love those. Or are you a school counselor or educator? Remember to hit submit after you've made your selection. This is super helpful for us to know, to help us tailor our answers. Okay, I'll give us about 10 more seconds. Okay, fantastic. Thank you. So it looks like we have a real nice mix here tonight, Christina and Jessica. We've got mostly parents and guardians. We have some student parent teams, plenty of counselors and educators, and some students here on their own as well. Thank you. Really, really helpful. Okay, so a little bit about CollegeWise before we jump in. We are on a mission to support families and educators with this college admissions process. We want to be, in fact, we would say we are the most trusted source of expert advice to help students access the transformative power of higher education. We really, really invest a lot of time and energy in making sure that we're providing resources to support families and educators the whole way through. There is a lot of noise out there, and it can be really hard for families to know who to trust. So we want to be that source of truth for families. So we do research, we publish papers, we attend conferences, so that when you come to CollegeWise, you know you're getting the most up-to-date information to help your students experience a less stressful and ultimately more successful journey to their best fit college. So what does this look like? Well, there are 3 main ways that we help families. The first is, as I said, we offer hundreds of free resources, including some of our partner resources like the webinar that you've attended tonight with the ACT. So we do webinars like this one. We produce ebooks and guides and white papers, all on pretty much every college admissions related topic you can imagine. In fact, we just published our annual guide to the Common App, which we develop in partnership with the Common App. So that's on our website. Please check it out. It's a great tool to help guide students through that process. Whether you're a school counselor, lots of school counselors use that tool to support their students, and whether you're a parent or a student as well. So the second way we help families is that we provide college admissions counselling for students across almost every component of the college admissions process, which includes college application strategy, leadership, extracurricular development, time management, soft skill guidance, research, internship support, tutoring and test prep. And I will not keep going on listing things, but in summary, we support with all sorts of different areas of the college admissions process, everything you can think of. And we provide support for students of all abilities, and as much as possible for families of all budgets. Okay, and then finally, we also do a lot of work with schools. So whether that's providing free resources or paid support for schools and school counselors, our goal is to make sure that we're providing tools that will really help school counselors and schools to deliver the best that they can for their students in this area. So I think that's enough about CollegeWise for now. I will now hand over to our lovely presenters to kick off the presentation.
Thank you, Belinda. My name is Jessica Nelson. I am a counselor here at CollegeWise. I have spent about 17 years in both college counseling and admissions at 3 different universities, including Georgia Tech, where I was an application reader. I worked at Landmark College, which is the premier school for students with learning differences. I was a transfer counselor there, so I was helping students once they'd achieved their 2-year degree to transfer to schools all over the nation. And those students all had one thing in common, that they had a learning difference. And I also come from a very neurodivergent family. I'm the parent of what I like to call a neuro-spicy kiddo. So this is a topic near and dear to my heart. Christina, I'll let you introduce yourself.
Thanks, Jessica. Hi, everyone. I'm Christina Mangano. I'm really excited to be here today to talk about something I'm truly passionate about, helping students with learning differences navigate their path to college success. I've been working in education and college counseling for over 30 years. It's been an incredible journey. I hold degrees in education, special education, education administration, special educational law, which gives me the technical foundation for this work, but honestly, some of my most valuable insights come from a much more personal place as a mom of a few daughters who are now through or currently in college, including 2 with ADHD. I absolutely love my job. There's just nothing quite like helping a student to discover their path to college and then making sure they're in a place and watching them thrive. I'm passionate, as is all CollegeWise, about sharing information and resources because I believe every student deserves to find their place in higher education. Today we're really excited to share some practical strategies and insights that can make the college application process not just manageable, but empowering for students with learning differences.
And a quick note before we jump into the agenda. We just want to make a note about language because the language around learning differences has really been changing and evolving, particularly over the last 5 to 10 years. learning disabilities to learning differences, neurodivergent, ASD, autism, person first, identity first. And that people really do have different philosophies and preferences in the language that they use. And you'll even hear Christina and I sometimes use different language. So we just want to throw that out there. And also, we absolutely understand that the range of disabilities that fall under neurodivergent or learning differences is vast, from dyslexia to autism to ADHD to even anxiety. And so they can all look very different in what they mean for a student and going to college, and they have very different needs and very different strengths. We think our presentation today will really help any student with an LD that's moving from high school to college. We do talk about college readiness, and so we do want to recognize that some of the examples and advice we may provide in that section may resonate more with a student on the spectrum or with ADHD, but again, we do feel it's pretty relevant information across the board. And Christina, I'll let you take it from there.
Great, thank you. Our agenda for today, we're going to briefly go over some differences to keep in mind with high school versus college readiness, the different levels of support that you could find in a college, the application process, some things to keep in mind. We'll then talk about next steps with college-wise, and we're going to leave room at the end for time at the end for questions and answers. So let's start with this whole college thing. So why this webinar? Why this information? Well, I know a lot of families that I talk to and students are worried about getting into college. I'm going to tell you that I never worry about that. I have an awful lot of experience in both the college and LD world, and I know that with the right research and the right application, there is never a need to worry about getting into college. What I'm more concerned about, what I like to focus on, is students getting through college and coming out feeling bigger, more confident, with more diverse views and problem solving and communication skills, feeling better about themselves and being more prepared to tackle life. For all students, and specifically for students with LDs and ADHD, that finding that right fit really requires the right research, understanding expectations and preparation. College students with learning differences face unique challenges, increased academic and social demands, diminished support from that they received at high school and when living at home, elevated risk for anxiety and stress. And historically, colleges have rarely focused on services for students with learning differences. Luckily, it's a trend that is changing. Today, more and more colleges are crafting services, but the quality and quantity differs tremendously from place to place. If we're talking, when you're looking in the LD field, it's LD/ADHD. ADHD is not considered a learning difference or a learning disability, but it is grouped in that it's covered under the same laws, which we'll get to later. But I do want to talk about specific skills that ADHD and other disabilities often are deficits, and that's executive functioning. That's the cognitive abilities needed to achieve goals often. And the most critical executive functioning skills that are used in college: organization, planning, prioritizing, time management, controlling impulses, resisting temptation, emotional control, focusing for an extended period, starting tasks without procrastination, self-motivation, flexible thinking. If a student's having difficulty with these, you're going to want to make sure that in addition to whatever supports are put in place, that there are academic coaches in place that will help them succeed in college, similar to how they did in high school. I'm sorry. So let's move on to some differences to keep in mind with high school. one of the bigger things is that there are change in laws and rights. In the United States, high school is a legal right, so schools must ensure that every student succeeds. That means that in order to succeed, they can modify a curriculum, reduce test questions, waive requirements through individual education plans, also known as IEPs, just to guarantee that learning happens. College, however, is not a legal right, it is a privilege. So they don't have to ensure success. They only have to ensure access. So many of you might be familiar with 504, like a 504 plan. That actually comes under Section 504, which is not an education law, it's a disability law. And it is required at any institution that receives federal funds. And that includes all colleges, except for maybe 5 or 6 very small religious schools. Every other college, including private colleges, receive federal funds, which means that colleges have to follow at least the minimum part of Section 504 disability section that removes any barriers for students with disabilities or other health impairments, such as ADHD or any other health impairments that might fit under there, such as anxiety or stress. What they will not and cannot do is modify their academic standards or modify curriculum requirements. Every student in college must meet the exact same educational benchmarks to earn their degrees. I think of high school like it's a gym coach. It's like going to the gym and having a personal trainer who will guarantee helping you getting fit. Where college, you just have access to the gym. Whether you go, whether you show up, whether you use the machines, whether you use them properly, that's all on you. So we want to make sure that everything is in place when you go to this gym/college so that the confidence, success follow. Okay, some other things to keep in mind between high school and college. In high school, there are teachers, people who were taught how to teach. They're judged, they are evaluated on how they get information inside their students' brains. They are responsible for teaching and for students learning. In college, although you may have some professors who happen to be great teachers, they are not taught to teach, nor are they responsible for teaching. They are responsible for professing the information that they know. Whatever their expertise is, they are only responsible for saying it, for getting it out there, not for ensuring that the student learns it. That then becomes the student's responsibility. So that's a very big change moving from high school to college. Another difference are grades and assessments. In high school, you often have at least semesters, if not quarters, and you will often have multiple grades before you get your final grade for the quarter or for the semester. So that means you have time to see if someone's slipping or failing or not doing well or needs a change. A parent could get a heads up. That often changes in college. Very often you might have just a midterm and a final. Assignments are not repeated over and over again. They're certainly not accepted late. It's here's the syllabus, here's when things are due, here's when an exam is being given, and a professor never has to give information again after that. You might not have the time to see the slide if something is sliding down and then say, whoops, this is a problem, I need to catch up, and I'm going to start making some changes, which means you have to be more proactive than reactive. There's also a responsibility shift. As I mentioned, there's the responsibility on teacher to student, but there's just all the responsibilities. Right now, their responsibility on taking medication. Are they eating? Are they wearing clean clothes? Are they bringing their lunch to school? Are they remembering that they can't go out till 2 in the morning because there's finals the next day? That responsibility is often shared. It's often shared with parents, with caretakers, with teachers who are helping to remember, who might say, hey, sit up front with me, or, hey, do you need a little help on that test before tomorrow? I know this was a problem. All of that now falls on the student. And the last big change that I always ask families to keep in mind is free time. I know that when my daughters were in high school, they had very little free time. They woke up and ate breakfast and went to school. When they often had sports or theater after school, came home, ate dinner, did homework or another activity, and went to bed. Their days were packed. They were in school, started at 8 and it finished at 3. In college, you may only have class 2 hours a day, maybe 3. It might only be 4 days. In matter of fact, in most schools, it's only 4 days a week. If you have 3 hours of class a day, that's 21 more hours that the student is now responsible for. Whether they go to the library, whether they join study groups, whether they go to academic services, whether they take a nap or get some sleep or socialize, that's all on them. And it's a big jump because a lot of kids haven't had that type of free time before then. All right, so those were the difference. I'm going to hand this back to Jess, and she's going to talk to you a bit about college readiness.
So we've talked a bit about the differences between high school and college, but before we talk about the application process itself, we really do want to dive a little bit deeper into the important factor of college readiness. And I think Christina was touching on this, but I think every parent worries about some aspect of their child's readiness for college. Have I taught them everything they need to know? Will they go to class? Will they wash their sheets more than once a semester? The answer is no. However, I feel for neurodivergent kiddos, these worries are really magnified. And it's very often the fact that your child just may need a longer runway. So what do I mean by that? I mean that they will be able to launch, to take off, to be successful. They just might need some more time to do it. So for some of the independent skill building that their peers may be able to do during their senior year, during the summer before they go to college, you may want to start these things with your sophomore, with your junior. And it's not too late if it's with your senior, but really thinking about the independent skill building piece. Because it is essential for them to be successful. It's not just the academics, but as Christina was pointing out, it's how they're managing their lives in college. And as we begin a new school year, as I know all of you are, some of you may be a week in, some of you might be a month in, but this is a really good time to do a skills inventory and recognize where the gaps might be, and start doing some of that independent skill building now. And I think this is a really great exercise to do as a parent or as a parent and child together, to kind of sit down and start with the beginning of your day and think through all those things you might be doing for your child throughout the day. I actually just wrote a blog about this on our CollegeWise website that goes a little bit more in depth if you want to check it out. But it's some of the things that Christina pointed out. Can they get themselves up in the morning? Can they manage their medications, which is a really big one? Can they manage their assignments, or do you get into Google Classroom every evening? Tutoring, can they set it up themselves, or have you always set up tutors for them when they needed it? Are they able to talk to their teachers? So if they're having difficulty understanding something, if they've had a conflict, do they feel comfortable sitting down with their teacher and having a discussion? Can they manage their own calendars? Is that either through old school paper and pen? Do they have an app? Are they using their Google Calendar? But are they able to do those things? And a quick note here, as you're thinking through your day and thinking about all those things you help with, it's really good to recognize that your child may not see all the things that you're doing for them, because oftentimes these are invisible supports. They're kind of this invisible safety net that we've been doing. And why I encourage parents to sit down and write what they've been doing is because sometimes it's become so automatic for us that we don't notice we're doing it anymore because it's just part of our daily routine. So I think sitting together and recognizing where those things are happening and where you can start to pass off responsibility is really important. And in my mind, high school is far less high stakes than college. You know, there are more assignments. The grade of your class isn't necessarily just built off of 3 tests and maybe a final paper. You have more opportunities to catch up. You know, if they forget a book, if they forget to study for a quiz, if they forget their instrument, not jumping in to rescue right away. Because say they had a quiz, they remembered it, they did the studying, they aced it. Well, guess what? Those little wins are building confidence that they can absolutely do this on their own. And when it doesn't go the way they want, they forgot their instrument, they forgot the library book, that's not a really big deal. But I don't know your library, maybe it is. But when, you know, when it doesn't go as planned, you can sit down and do a recap. What went wrong? What do we need to do? What system failed us this time? But it is important to have these small successes and these small wins so we can really start to build that confidence, and the failures build resilience. And lastly, we hear the word self-advocacy a lot. But what does that actually mean when we use the word self-advocacy? So self-advocacy, when we think about it, is really knowing what your needs are, articulating what your needs are, and knowing what you need to be successful. And for a student really to do most things in college, pick a major, pick where they want to go to college, any of these things, they really do need to know themselves, know their strengths, know their challenge areas. For that reason, Christina and I are strong advocates of students sitting in their IEP meetings. If they haven't already, I go as far to say if they've done like psych educational testing, they should read it. I think it's really informative because it allows them to know, here are the things I'm really good at, but here are going to be my challenge areas, and really having an in-depth knowledge of that so that they can have a conversation with a faculty member when they go to college about what's going to help them be successful in a class. And really, in my mind, disclosure is a lifelong skill. They will have to disclose in maybe at jobs they're at, maybe they're disclosing in the application that they have a learning disability, and we'll talk more about that. But building those skills now is important. So self-advocacy, where are you going to find it? So now that we kind of have those pieces together, like we've established, okay, it's ready for college environment. So let's see. When I think about the college atmosphere for supports and learning disabilities, and it sounds like I'm hearing that I'm cutting out a little bit. All right. Let me turn my Bluetooth off and see if that helps. Oh, I've heard it sounds better now. Okay. We'll go with it, but let me know if you're continuing to not hear me well. So thinking about identifying the right supports in college, there's really about 3 different levels, and we've designated them as basic, coordinated, and structured support programs. Basic, and then this is when it comes for what they offer to students who require accommodations. Basic means what they have to offer by law. So that is deemed reasonable accommodations. Reasonable is the language that they use, which is how a college wants to interpret it. So oftentimes that means they may offer extended test taking time, taking a test in a distraction-free zone, maybe a note taker, but it really is bare bones what they have to offer by law. And that covers a majority of institutions. And this is any institution that receives federal financial aid. Coordinated support services do offer a little bit more. So they usually have professional staff that are trained in this field. They may offer skill workshops to students. They might help students with advocating. In addition to peer tutors, they might have professional tutors. They're oftentimes better at assistive technology. So if you have a student who needs a text reader or speech to text, or needs their textbooks in a digital format, they've had a lot more reps at doing those things. They may offer academic coaching. So somebody who may sit down with your student every couple of weeks and really help them plan out their semester, help them work with their study skills, but they're offering a little bit more. And then structured or proactive programs. This is really what I think of as oftentimes the pay to play. They are an additional cost to the student because they are receiving a much higher level of support. They have a structured learning center. So they meet with a professional learning specialist or a coach 1 to 3 times a week, with the idea that it lessens over time as they are able to do more of the skills themselves as they go on up in college. It may have a specific autism program that offers social support, specific career counseling. And these programs tend to be separate from disability support. So you can go to one of these colleges and register for disability services. And not do the structured support program, or you can go register for disability support services and then also registered for a structured support program there for an additional level of help. And a note on like registering for support services. So the reason Christina and I have this picture on this slide that gives us heart palpitations is, when you look at this, do you feel better knowing that she has a harness on? I do. And I think the same way about having accommodations in college. Oftentimes I might have a student say like, well, I don't use them in high school. I don't need them. I don't want them in college. I don't want to be labeled. And I get that. And I understand that. But I always encourage families to register for disability support services before they start as a freshman, because services are not retroactive. Services, so say your student takes a test, they don't do well on it, and they realize, oh, you know what? Having extended test taking time would have made a really big difference. So they go and they register for support services at that point. It can take 4 to 6 weeks, maybe before those accommodations get in place. And in the meantime, they're doing all of their classes, they're taking more tests, they're taking more quizzes, and possibly falling behind with other accommodations. So having them there at the start, hopefully the student uses them, but maybe they don't need them, but they're there if they do need them at some point in time. So I always recommend registering for support services right from the start. And I'll have Christina talk a little bit more about, when you're assessing some of these programs, what are the things you should look for.
Thanks, Jessica. Before we get into talking about questions for disability services, I want to address student disclosure, because very often people are afraid to ask questions because they're worrying or concerned about whether a student should disclose their disability on the college application. And the short answer to that is, it depends. It depends on the student. It depends on the specific situation. To me, it's similar to whether you're going to disclose whether or not you're a vegetarian when you go to a restaurant. Sometimes it's necessary. You need to know what the ingredients are. Or it's a place that just serves pasta and there's no meat there and there's no need for you to ask. It depends. In every situation, I get to know my student very well. I get to know their situation, and then we decide when and where to disclose. I would consider disclosing if the disability significantly impacted academic performance and you need context for grades and test scores from the past. And then you could show, and then I received the support I needed, and that's why my grades started going up, and I'm moving into school. I'm coming to school with the skills and tools that I I have learned since then. If you want to highlight resilience, growth, self-advocacy skills, if you've done meaningful advocacy work or projects related to the disability, and of course, if you're applying specifically to a program, to one of the programs that require that student that have support for students with disabilities. You may choose not to disclose if your academic record speaks for itself without needing any explanation, or you want to establish yourself first and you see no reason to explain your disability. It doesn't show up anywhere on your transcript, and then you'll seek accommodations after admissions. If you're concerned about disclosing because of potential bias, then and that should not be a factor legally, but if that is still a concern of yours, you may want to consider whether that's a school that you want to attend, if that's a school that's going to be biased against it. So when you are researching schools, I very, very strongly suggest that you go and meet the people who are running disability services, speak to them. If you're not visiting the school, call, have long conversations. When my daughters were going to school, I scheduled meetings for them to have with disability services. They sat on the phone with them for 30 to 60 minutes, answering all their questions. Will disability services speak to admissions? No, and that's crucial to understand. Those offices separate separately. They are two different departments. Admissions reviews applications, makes decisions. Disability services provides accommodations for enrolled students. There's a firewall between them, legally and ethically. So you can contact disability services to ask about accommodation support services while you're applying, and you don't have to worry about whether or not you're going to be disclosing on your application. You can make that separate. When you are looking to contact disability services, it might go under different names. Sometimes it's called student services or academic support, accessibility, disability resources, student access services, Center for Students with Disabilities. I'd love if they had one name. Play with the wording, look on Google. If you put disabilities in there, it usually will pop up. And you could contact them anytime during your college search. I would not consider a school seriously until you do that research, though. Questions that you might want to ask them: what documentation do you require? How recent should it be? What accommodations are needed besides the very basic ones that are required by law? How do they request it? What's the process and timeline? Do you offer peer mentoring or support groups, academic coaching? Who does it? Is it a professional, a learning disability professional, or is it one of my classmates who has no training in this? How many are there for your students? I visited a school recently that is known for its excellent disability services. I was very impressed for what they offered. They had 4 people working there for a school of about 17,000. Those are the type of questions you want to ask, though. So how often can you see them? Can we make sure it's proactive? Can I come 1 or 2 times a week to meet with a coach? Another question: do you provide transition support for incoming freshmen? Because very often there's a bridge needed, more help needed that first year. So the bottom line: students have complete control over when or how they disclose. You can apply without disclosure and then register for disability services after enrollment, or choose to include it, but make sure you've asked questions. One more note: they will not know from transcripts. A guidance officer and a teacher legally are not allowed to put it in their letters of recommendation unless you ask them to in writing. And it cannot show up anywhere on the transcript. If you ask for disabilities if you're taking your ACT test, it will not show up that you received accommodations. This is all covered under HIPAA. If you have certain classes that are labeled a certain way that might have the word support in it, they might be able to guess from the name of the class, but otherwise there's no way they know unless you tell them. I'm going to hand it right back to Jessica, who's going to talk to you about Thanksgiving, and then will come back to me again.
So we'll spend the next 10 minutes or so kind of turning our focus towards the application process specifically and how it might be a little bit different. But I do really like this Thanksgiving picture as a metaphor for the application process, because I liken the college application process to having to put on a Thanksgiving dinner. And if any of you out there have done this before, it can be intense. You're often having to get out multiple dishes at the same time, piping hot for the 20 people sitting around your table. So it takes a lot of planning, a lot of forethought, a lot of prep the days beforehand to make sure that it all comes out yummy and warm, and not like my last Thanksgiving dinner where I burned the dinner rolls and about 3 other dishes because I didn't do my timing well. So now imagine you're 17 years old and you're having to get this Thanksgiving dinner out for 20 people. Maybe you're starting to feel a little bit anxious thinking about that. Now imagine you're 17 years old getting this Thanksgiving dinner out and you have executive functioning issues. So planning issues, right? Being able to execute, plan, initiate activities. It's honestly why working with a college counselor in my mind can be really beneficial because we can kind of help with all these moving parts. But there is a lot to manage in this process. So starting early, staying hyper organized, using your Excel sheets and Google Sheets to look at all the different dates because there aren't uniform dates for every college. All of them need different materials at different timings. Some want test scores, some don't, some take them self-reported. So again, just kind of the benefits of finding somebody who can help you organize these, it can be huge. So we're going to look at some of those moving parts, standardized testing, kind of creating an empowering narrative, so that we can give you a sneak peek into what this process looks like with some tips as you head into that application season.
Okay, we'll start with standardized testing, especially since we're at an ACT event. So the testing landscapes changed dramatically, and many colleges, almost all colleges during COVID went test optional, where you were able to decide if you wanted to submit your scores. Many of those schools are now going back to requiring standardized test scores. And that's something you're going to want to keep on top of. The best way to keep on top of it is by looking at the school's website. What they have right now for the class of 2026 is going to be different than class of 2027. You're going to want to read to look to say if they have made decisions for many years out, or if that's just a decision for this year. For many schools, this is the last year that they chose to be test optional. The most important thing to remember, what I always tell my students is take the test and then we'll decide what to do with the scores, except if it's going to cause tremendous anxiety. That's going to be more of a problem. That's something else that we're going to talk about, that I would talk about separately with the student. But if anxiety is not an issue, or if time isn't an issue, take the test and then see whether or not you want to use it. I like having kids take it junior year. I usually have them take the ACT in the fall of junior year if they've finished Algebra 2, at the end of junior year if they need to finish Algebra 2, and then that gives them time to take it again in the summer or the very, very beginning of senior year. If you have accommodations in school through an IEP or a 504, then you are eligible for accommodations taking the test. And as I mentioned, that will not show up anywhere on the test scores. No one knows who has accommodations, whether it means time and a half, taken over multiple days. with certain technology, that's not written. You need to find out who your SST coordinator is at your school. It's usually whoever's taking care of the 504 plans, and they will help coordinate your accommodation request or at least guide you through the steps. Most schools, at least public schools, the SSD coordinator, which is the Services for Students with Disability coordinator, will coordinate the accommodations. For ACT, you need to sign up for the test first, and then you're able to apply for accommodations. If you look on your screen to where resources are, we've provided a link to more information about applying for accommodations. I would sign up early, and then I would apply immediately. You don't want there's a few week turnaround, so you're certainly not something you want to do at the very last minute. When you are looking at test optional policies at school or test policies at schools, become familiar with different terms. Test optional with exceptions, because certain schools still require them for specific programs like engineering or honors. Test blind, like if you're living in California where the scores are not considered even if they are submitted, or text flexible, where they might take AP scores instead of one of the other standardized test scores. The other site to look at is fairtest.org. They also have a current list if that's a concern. But as I mentioned, if you're not sure, I always suggest take the first test. If you don't, it often takes the anxiety off the student, knowing, and if you don't do well, we could look at schools that are test optional, but try to take the first one and we'll see where to go from there. I'm going to let Jess finish up.
And just some final tips for success before we take some questions here. But it's really important to remember in this process that it's okay to be pointy. And what I mean by that is I think, we hear in the nomenclature that colleges want a well-rounded student that has done a little bit of everything. What they really want is a well-rounded class. So they want students who all do their own thing and have their own interests, which means being a pointy student helps them make their well-rounded class. And by being pointy, that means you have deep interest and deep passions. And that's okay. It's a great thing to lean into during your application process. And oftentimes when I talk to students about their passions, their strengths, what they're really good at, a lot of these are oftentimes enabled by the fact that they do have a differently wired brain. So when we think about, our kiddos with ADHD, these are highly inventive, hyper-focused on their areas of interest, strong emotional expression, highly creative. Our dyslexic students are big picture thinkers, often have great artistic skills and spatial reasoning. Our students on the autism spectrum, these are our truth tellers, super loyal students, great with pattern recognition. So I think about how can we harness some of these strengths that we know are inherent to their differently wired brains for telling their narrative and telling their story in the application process. You want to think of it as, don't ask yourself what a college wants me to be. Be yourself and lean into that, because you don't want this to be like a bad dating profile where you represent yourself one way and then show up as somebody totally different. You want the college to love you for you. So for instance, if you're a student that reads voraciously, I had a student that read 4 to 5 books a week. We put it on her activities list because what college doesn't love a reader? And her essay was about her deep love of reading and how it had gotten her through hard times. And then finally, just because I'm looking at the time and I want to make sure we can get to some of your great questions, is again, knowing what you need. So being able to define your areas of challenge and the level of support that seems right, it can be tricky at first. But I think really kind of, again, turning inward, knowing yourself and thinking about what you need in this process will allow you to ask the right questions, And remember, like, please, please, please ask all the questions you have of colleges and their disability support services. This is like buying a house. You don't want to buy a house without asking every single darn question you have. So please ask the questions during this process to make sure this next big move feels right. And I think one of the last thoughts I want to leave you with too is I think we get it stuck in our head sometimes that advocating for ourselves or asking for help or what feels like help can be a sign of weakness. But I think knowing when we can't do something alone is really a sign of strength that ultimately leads to our success. So that's what we really need to cue into. And with that, I'm going to turn it back over to Belinda, who I think is going to help us with the next step.
Thank you so much. I always learn so much from both of you. So we do have time for some questions. I see them pouring in right now, so thank you for those. A couple of those questions are asking a bit more information about CollegeWise and how we support families. So I'm going to spend 1 minute wrapping up that, and then I'll start feeding some questions to Christina and Jessica. So I know you've heard a lot of helpful insights today, but there's only so much detail that we can go into in a webinar like this. So you may be sitting there, maybe feeling a little bit overwhelmed and wondering, okay, but what does this mean for my student? And that's really what CollegeWise is here for. As I mentioned earlier, we've been doing this work for over 25 years, and in that time, we've helped thousands of families navigate this journey. As an organization, we strongly believe that every family deserves a more simplified and successful approach to the college application process. There is so much noise and misinformation out there, but CollegeWise provides students with a safe space so that they can tackle the process confidently, and so that we can take the pressure off parents and guardians suddenly feeling like they need to become a college admissions expert. So what people like Christina and Jessica do at CollegeWise, and 100 other of our amazing counselors, is they really help your family press pause on all that noise. So we help students make super confident, intentional choices based on who they are, their strengths, their interests, their goals, and then we help them build applications that reflect that in a really authentic and powerful way. We provide guidance for families that covers every aspect of the admissions process, from application strategy and essay support to project management, test prep. And we have options for every budget level, ranging from our hundreds of free resources. Definitely check out the resources that are provided tonight on the webinar, and feel free to go to our website as well, right through to our one-to-one college admissions counselling support as well. So I'm going to go ahead and launch a quick poll. And the question is, if you are interested in learning more about working with CollegeWise and you would like us to contact you, you can let us know here what it is that your family is interested in. So select A, and then one of our team members will contact you to talk about programs and options to build an individualized plan for your family if you're thinking that maybe you would like to work with CollegeWise directly. B, maybe you're not sure if you want to work with CollegeWise, but you'd love to learn a little bit more about us. C, you just want to check out our free resources. And if that is you, that is absolutely fine. We love providing free information to families. So we can send you a couple of links if you select C. And then D, you're a counsellor or an educator and you'd like to learn more about the kind of support that we do for schools. Okay, remember to click submit. I'll leave that open for just a little bit longer. Okay, so whilst we finish up with that, I have some awesome questions that I would love to cover with Christina and Jessica. So if you can come back on with your cameras, both of you. Okay, so we'll try and get through as many as possible. My first question is, somebody is asking, would you recommend a child with learning differences perhaps do a one-year community college before leaving for university?
I think that has to do with what Jessica spoke about with readiness, and identifying if socially, emotionally, and academically they're ready. And if you are going to take a gap year, I would consider what is going to happen during that gap year that's going to prepare you to get ready. One of those answers is going to be just that the brain is developing, which is always a good thing. But in addition, are there going to be things in place that will be bringing the independence or the resilience or the skills needed for them to be ready for the second year? I very strongly believe that no one's path has to be completely straight. This is not like one of those sidewalks in the airport, those electric that once you get on, you can't get off. You should be able to prepare your own journey. So I think there's many options and many different routes that the kids can consider, and it depends on the child.
Anything to add there, Jessica?
I mean, that's essentially what I would have said. The one other thing that I would add is if you feel like your student might benefit from some remedial coursework, you're more likely to find that in the community college system. So say if maybe they have a deficit in math and could benefit from a non-credit math class or a non-credit English class before taking a credit college course, you can do that in the community college system. So I've seen some students go that route because maybe they do have the deficit in math and they want, to slowly kind of ramp up to a 4-credit math class.
All right. So the next question, a little bit spicy, getting into politics, but I'm going to ask it anyway. So because of the political climate and changes with DEI and college funding and things like that, should high-functioning students talk about their challenges with autism or dyslexia? Or is it better to write about their passions or plans for their major? And where should they bring it up within their common application?
I'm never going to tell a student not to write about who they are. If that's important to their identity and who they are and who they plan to be in this world, and it's part of their story, I'm here to support that 100%. Regardless of this climate, because I think Christina said this, if they don't want you for who you are, like that's a warning flag for me. And also, colleges, it's illegal to not admit because of a learning disability or disclosure of a disability. But it also goes back to why are you disclosing? Is it because it's a core piece of your personality? Yeah, I've had students do that who want to kind of talk a little bit about how this factors into their identity. Or they're talking about it because it explains something in their application. Now, does your personal statement, which is the big essay that goes to all the colleges, is that the right place to put it? I think if you're talking about this as part of your identity, sure. If it's explaining an anomaly somewhere in your application, there is a section called the additional information section in the common application, and that can oftentimes be a really good place to put it. So let's say freshman year was tough because you were struggling with a late diagnosis of ADHD. You were kind of figuring those pieces out. You brought up your grades since then. That would be a great place to bring it up. Keep it short and sweet, to the facts. Kind of, this is where I was at, this is where I'm at now, and I'm doing great. I'm ready to take on the challenges of college. I don't know if you have anything to add, Christina.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Again, it depends on the kid. I'm thinking this year my caseload has 6 students with ASD, and I think 4 of them are incorporated it in some way into their essay because it's just to them a big part of their identity in a very positive, beautiful way. And showing, like we should with every essay, here's a great thing about myself that I'd like you to know about and how I'm going to contribute to your campus as a result of it. Going back to the beginning part about should they write about their major, they should write about themselves. Their academics are going to show up on their transcript. If a school wants to know about their passion for their major, they're going to probably put it in their supplemental questions. So that will probably be an additional question. And if they want to talk about something very special with their major because it's big to their identity, then I would go that route.
Okay, well, I think that's all the questions we're going to get to tonight. I'm so sorry if we didn't get to answer yours. Thank you so much, everybody. We've really enjoyed being here tonight. I will hand back over to Candice to finish us out.
Thank you so much to CollegeWise and our incredible presenters tonight, Belinda, Christina, and Jessica. Your insights are so valuable, and I know it's really going to help what can be such an overwhelming time as families are exploring these options. We really appreciate you being here with us and helping further the mission of supporting our students and their champions. The webinar will be emailed to you within 2 weeks, and it's also going to be available on act.org on the My Journey page. One last item as we say goodbye. When the webinar ends, there's going to be a survey that pops up, and we'd appreciate it if you could take 5 minutes to let us know how we did and how we can best support you and your students in the future. On behalf of ACT and CollegeWise, thank you so much for joining us.